Chris, thank you so much for hopping on. The goal of this interview is really to chat about the story of Kabuki, what it's up to these days, specialty bars, etc. But I feel it would be remiss if we didn't chat about your childhood first, just to give a quick explanation of that. Would you mind just giving us a quick overview?
Yeah. We'll try to do the elevator pitch version, but it is pretty central to Kabuki itself, and that is really about understanding the passion behind Kabuki in regards to helping people develop resilience, to be able to overcome adversity, the adversity in the gym, adversity in life, and have the right tools to empower you to be successful. And not just get beaten down by those sorts of things. So my story is I grew up homeless in the wilderness. So this is in Northern California and then later in Eastern Oregon. Yeah, it was a low-income lifestyle, we'll put it that way, living in tents, living in tree forts, foraging for food, killing animals, but also dealing with some of the negative stuff in that environment. My parents were there because it was they were involved in the drug trade. It was quite big in the late 70s and 80s in Northern California. We were actually living in a place called Murder Mountain, or about 50 miles more deeper and more remote than that. And so I had experiences dealing with, drug running, drug abuse, murderers, a serial killer, human trafficking, the scope is pretty messed up. So most of my youth, about half of it was homeless, and the other half maybe in a trailer home or a shack that didn't have running water or electricity or both. And so it was a difficult environment, and out of that, I had to really step up and challenge myself to be able to be successful in life, right? So it involved being very good at academics and athletics. And I started this stuff very early on. So I first started training around 11 years old. And a lot of times it was like makeshift stuff. Like we didn't have the thing. So it was making, tying up a branch in between trees for pull-ups, and making, cement, using cement weights that I found in the nickel ads, and just piecing stuff together to be able to train in some fashion or another. And that was kind of my early upbringing. And then it transferred. So there's really, I'm going to carry the story forward relatively fast, but just to give some idea on the background for Kabuki. So I ended up going to school for a dual engineering degree and then an MBA. And I was raising my sisters. I actually took custody of them during the scope of this and got them out of the environment that I was in. And at the time, I started getting more involved with lifting on a competitive side, which is where I started competing in powerlifting. I was also ramping up my experience in the industrial sector. So I was working in the manufacturing world, a lot of expertise around metallurgy, fabrication, lots of different concepts. So for nearly 20 years, that's what I did, was ran manufacturing companies in either heavy industrial equipment, an aerospace company, a couple different automotive manufacturing companies. And so that was what I did during the day. And then I ended up owning a gym in the evening because I wanted the best place to train. And I'm just like I said, early on, I was making my own stuff to make it just right. And so I wanted to be the best strength athlete that I could be in the world. And that involved building my own gym. It started in my basement, moved to my garage, so on. And I built all the equipment in it. And we had this large commercial space, ended up growing to like 9,000 square feet. And that is around the time I was also doing continuing education. This sounds completely random, but I was doing continuing education in the clinical space around developmental kinesiology, neurology, lots of things in that aspect. Because again, I wanted to be the best. I wanted to explore all this stuff. And so that was really starting to affect like the lens that I looked at training. And so I was seeing a lot of gaps. I was already doing a lot of videos online. I started my YouTube channel in 2007, and then I was an author for a variety of different sites at the time because I was a fairly well-known athlete in the strength realm. And I'm like, I can change people's like quality of life. I can get people out of pain. I can get them living a better quality of life. And I knew it. It wasn't just like, oh, I believe this. Like the things, like the messaging, the content that I put out, just free content around like foot mechanics and breathing and bracing, was having this impact. I was getting messages back. And I'm like, I need to go into this full term. And so 2015, I walked away from that corporate, high-paying, secure career to the life of risk, and started Kabuki Strength. That was employee number one in April and May of 2015. Yeah.
2015. Okay. So take me back to that basement gym. How long before Kabuki did you have that basement gym, and what did it eventually look like? Or what did it start off looking like, I should say?
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember, I think around 2003, maybe 2002, I got together with a friend and we had a mill and we milled our first rack. So did all the holes one by one, the west side barbell spacing, and, ordered a bunch of bars and put together this garage gym. And it was actually at his house. So that was put together around 2003. And then he ended up kind of getting burnout on lifting. We built all the equipment. We moved it into my basement. And I think that was around 2005 or 6. And so it was in my basement. And you can actually see that in my original videos on YouTube in 2007. You'll see this bright yellow or orange room. I had everything. It was barely fit. Like I had, an 1/8 of an inch between the ceiling and the top of my rack. And just this random stuff. I had the rack that we built, and I built a glute ham raise that I could, a reverse hyper that I could slide into it, pin into it. And I built my own low-high pulley. Like everything in there was completely 100% I fabricated myself, right? And so you can see that, like I said, I think that was around 05, 06. And then you start seeing it online around 07. Ran out of that space, and that got moved up basically actually to my driveway, because by that time I built a monolift myself, because kind of wild story, but I wanted to do this meet, and it was a full power meet, monolift. That's where I was planning on doing. And then like 2 months beforehand, they're like, well, we're going to make it a bench press deadlift only because the owner of the gym sold the monolift. We don't have a monolift. And I'm like, keep it on the schedule. I'm going to show up with a monolift. They're like, well, you don't have one. I'm like, I'll have one. Don't cancel it. So I had to every week post progress videos of this monolift I was building in my driveway. and so showed up at the meet, winched it off the trailer, competed, and then got it back home. And we trained that summer in my driveway with the neighbors watching. Every Saturday morning they'd sit out on a bench and watch from across the street all these ladies as we train in my driveway. And then I finally moved. I had my project vehicles. My business partner now, Rudy, had a place to store those in. So we moved those into there, and then moved the gym into the shop. And so it existed in the shop for several more years until I think we had 30 people coming over and training in the garage. And my then wife said, this has got to go. So we leased a 4,000 square foot space in Southeast Portland across the street. So across the street was one of the most ghetto strip clubs you could ever imagine. And then next to us was the weed shop. And so that's, it was pretty low rent area. And we were there until I think maybe 2012 is when we leased the larger building that we're in now, which has actually grown quite a bit. And so when I talk about Kabuki Strength, people oftentimes don't realize the company started in 2015 in the manufacturing, but because the sense is it's been around a lot longer. And that's because I've been a figure in the sport. We've owned the gym and done all this stuff a lot longer.
Makes sense. That is so cool. Okay. So you're creating equipment. You ultimately build your own gym, basically. You're in this corporate world, high figure, probably making a lot of money. Can you tell me what ultimately led you to start Kabuki Strength and start from scratch?
Well, there was a lot of years that we would joke around in the gym and go, because everything was all very custom, and it was like, oh, we should make that into a product. We should make that. Like, they had this idea about face savers on the bench, and like you'd come up with these ideas, and then we'd sit on them. A couple of years later, all of a sudden, it'd be a product on the market. You'd be like, we should have done that, right? Like that's an idea. Like those didn't exist, and now they do. And it's like, yeah, we had that. So there was that, but the other side was really me in where my life was at. So I had this high-paying, high-stress corporate career. I had 2 kids at home. I had my hobbies. I had my training. I had the gym. I had all this stuff in life, and it was like, my kids are getting a little older. They're going to be getting involved in sports. Like, how am I going to package like all the things that I do? I can't do this. Like, something has to give. So the only logical alternative, right, was the job. So I quit my job. But it was really, it's the second half of my autobiography, The Eagle and the Dragon. So the dragon is like this purposeful reinvention, deciding who you want to be and becoming that person. And so this is how I wanted to impact the world. And it was really tying all the things that I am passionate about. I am passionate about coaching and helping people realize more than that they can accomplish. I'm passionate about my creative outlets and ability to physically transform things. I'm passionate about community and having the right people around me. And if I can get people connected to that vision to be part of it, like that's going to be an important component. So that is, that was really kind of the driver, is to pare away the non-essential and make the things that I was doing. So like my job, not a separate thing, but it is my hobbies. It's my career. It's all these things packaged into one. It is my community. It's my, I don't have to go anywhere else. And so that was the formation of Kabuki. And it was because I really truly believe that what we had as far as products and education could vastly transform the face of strength training. And at this time, if we go back before like any of the concepts where I was talking about breathing and bracing and foot mechanics and all these, the original videos that I did on these concepts and built up, no one was talking about these things in strength sports. And it was all, lock down hard, arch your back, sit back, like all this, just like work through the pain. And, there's so much that's shifted in the course of strength training over the last 10 years that's been an output of this. The entire framing of like barbells and how they're used, and like so much has happened. I mean, specialty bars were not a thing. It was like they were out there, but they were things that, specialty barbells were these oddball things that some home fabricator made a few of this or that. It wasn't like established products that like are built on a mass production, frame with the level of quality and with the concepts, from a design standpoint instilled into that product, as well as the education around, like they didn't exist. And so that entire market really wasn't developed the way that it is now.
Got it. And you mentioned things like positioning and those sorts of like things that just weren't talked about in the world of lifting weights and such. Did you kind of like take a deep dive into this as you were pursuing strength goals, or like what about this made you want to take it even deeper and learn even more and get to where you're at now and, ultimately create products for it?
So at first it started from self-interest, right? So I wanted to understand what was going on with myself, and I wanted to be the strongest that I could possibly be. And so I realized that, and that's where I started doing this clinical continuing ed. So I had a string of surgeries around 2008 to 2010. So I had shoulder surgery, detached 2 heads of my pec. I had left elbow surgery, right elbow surgery, tore my adductor pretty terribly, and a meat got shot out into the crowd, like a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, something isn't right here. Like everybody says I'm a technician, my technique looks perfect, but like, why am I keep going around? And so this is where I started doing a lot of clinical continuing education. So I met a really great mentor in the clinical side. His name's Dr. Philip Snell. He's one of the leaders on the West Coast as far as like creating courses and getting influential figures involved in it. And I started networking with a lot of very important figures like him, Dr. Stuart McGill, Dr. Kelly Starrett, Dr. Craig Liebenson, who's brought like kind of this theory around developmental kinesiology that's pretty central. He brought that to the US, introduced me to all the instructors. Like I met Dr. Charlie Weingroff, like all these like leaders and shakers that write the books literally that are used in that clinical space. And so that was for a personal level, right? But as I'm doing that, that's where I said this, though my lens of equipment started, the lens with which I looked at things started changing. So that influenced a lot of the video content and some of the education and coaching that I was doing. But this is where I started seeing gaps in the equipment and realizing, yes, physically we can get joints in a better position. We can allow those to get stacked up. We can rebalance the length tension relationship. We can get people in better positions without fighting against a barbell because it's just specifically this random straight object, and putting it in various positions on the body may create a lot of context around coaching and position to be able to actually get in a position where you're not fighting the barbell, right? And so at the end of the day, what I realized is once on the neurological side that we're changing the neurological inputs as well into the nervous system in the brain, which then comes back and has an impact on the muscles that are engaged, how they're engaged, what's working as prime movers, what's working as stabilizers, what is our sensation around tightness and pain. And so there's a lot of depth in this. And that is where that's the value of like what specialty bars do, is we can allow us to get in positions to maximize our training by reducing being in positions that putting strain on joints and connective tissue that can't adapt to the stresses, because there's adaptive structures and non-adaptive structures, as well as actually improving the patterns of the muscle tissue that's firing during that, which is going to, again, reduce the potential for reduced mobility, as well as, again, our recovery. So we've got a limited materials. Humans are materials. Behind you is steel, is materials, right? Every physical structure out there, whether biological or not, has a limited capacity for loading, right? If you load that chain too much, cycle it too much, you'll end up failing, right? So it means that we also have the limited capacity for recovery. So if we're pushing ourselves and ability and recovering, wasting a lot of our recovery time on non-adaptive, we're not going to make as much progress than like maximizing the training type that we can adapt to and are recovering just from that. You're going to make a lot more progress over time. Wow, that's a lot of mumbo jumbo words. Like it comes down to getting people in the right positions and being able to get stronger, to get faster, and to get bigger with the same amount of physical work and inputs, and while at the same time potentially reducing the level of risk for injury. And that's why, like, you see that thing behind me there? That's just a sampling of like the teams that we work with in the sports performance world. People think about me as a power lifter. They might think about Kabuki as a power lifter and not realize that in the sports performance world, our concepts are used nearly universally. Like Kabuki strength is across nearly every major college, professional sports team, your top tier facilities like IMG Academy or Michael Johnson Performance or many others. They're all using Kabuki because of this reason.
Yep. Makes sense to me.
So that's a bit of a tangent. Sorry. I just I went on a passion, but like once I have this unique, like I said, lens. So one, it's a high performance athlete. It's also the manufacturing side, but it's also this high level of like continuing ed on the clinical space as it relates to biomechanics, neurology, and developmental kinesiology, and all that pulls together to create the products that we produce, which is going to be able to accommodate for the variability of a person, because we all have a little bit different limb lengths. We have different mobility restrictions, different heights. So we need to be able to adapt to that instead of shoving everybody all through one. And then at the same time, make us not fight the equipment so we can get the right inputs into the body, have the joints in the right position. And all of a sudden, bam, now you can do things that you couldn't do before.
Right. Well, to me, it feels like the way you're describing it is your mission and your goals haven't really changed since day one.
No.
It sounds like that was the original intent. So could you tell me what was that first product that you made for Kabuki?
Yeah. So the first product was actually the shoulder rock. And so again, coming from a powerlifter, why would the first product be this swinging device? But at the time, mace swinging was not really a known thing. So I'd done a lot of research out there. It had a lot of really great results from mace swing, but mace swinging done correctly. So all the education that was available at the time on YouTube would end up with like sore wrists, sore elbows. It wasn't getting the response. But I found when I paired the right length product with the right balance with these concepts around position, the balance of relaxation, contraction, and body positions, that it would you could realize phenomenal results. And so as a whole, I saw a lot of power lifters and bodybuilders that I work with really, really tight shoulders that were impacting a lot of things. It might be driving their back pain because they lack shoulder mobility, so they get their mobility from their spine. And so that was the first one. So the shoulder rock was to take this classical instrument, get it the right length, because the few that were being made that were out there were the wrong length, because it's probably in my marketing material, so this may be a repeat of stuff. But when they're shorter, one mace you can use for a lot larger width of training, if that makes sense. So the lever's shorter, but you don't get the right inputs into the nervous system, because it does come down to this balance of relaxation to contraction as you're firing, as you're going through. And that's what's resetting the patterns. And so the classical length is a certain length, which is about 46 to 49 inches. But when you do that, a small change in weight means very big things. So it means that you have to tell your customer base that you're going to need like 10 maces. And then it becomes not very feasible and it's hard to sell, right? So that's where the shoulder rock came from, is how do we micro load this with a current modern weight plate, do it in a fashion that if they don't mount it correctly, that the weight can't ever possibly fling off and hurt someone. Even if it's not my fault, it's still, I can't design a product and get it out in the field that has that potential. And so that was the impetus for the first product was the shoulder rock. And I think that really set the tone for the type of products and things that we were going to do, right? It was around about improving movement and patterns and, reduction in pain and increase in performance. And the very next product was the Duffin bar. And so you can see it kind of, it was, I didn't have a team. I didn't have a market, marketing was really the products that, as people see it, they start making that connection to who you are as a company and a brand. And that's been central to our identity. We're not a be all, end all, everything company. We're not a Rogue Fitness. We're not an Amazon. We make very specific things that do very big things.
Right. I'd be curious to hear maybe the second product, how does the release of the Duffin bar back in, I'm guessing 2016-ish, compared to
actually, no, that was that was August of 2015. Yeah.
Okay. So 2015. So
a lot of these products, they seems like really fast. I'd had them developed.
Right.
We were using I had, there was the Buffalo bar that was out for quite some time. I was very unhappy with that product. It'd been around since the 1990s, but it was executed really poorly, had the wrong bend. So to have the right ones in my gym, I'd experimented years before and developed a whole group of those bars for our gym and had formed them myself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
I think I ran over your question, but
no problem. Good to know. And that makes sense. You had them ready to go. You had lots of ideas. You probably had them in your gym. They just weren't being produced.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious to hear from a market perspective, how does the release of the Duffin bar compare, the market response compared to if you released a specialty bar today? Is there quite a bit more education, or are still people whoa, what's going on here? Why would I need that?
Yeah. So We had, it's substantially different. We'll put it that way. So it's kind of interesting too, because I almost want to tell the story of the Transformer bar as it relates to this, because it was maybe the next year, 2016, I released the Transformer bar, and we didn't sell any for like a year and a half, 2 years. Like by any, I mean, just not very many. Right. Mm-hmm. And it was really an understanding of just like how important the education is, but also the words and how we use those. So I was at a trade show and I'm sitting there because it's like swamped with all these performance coaches. And I'm just sitting there trying different words through the day about how to connect the dots. And I'm like, talking about how it changes the load as it relates to the hip joint and all, and then I'm like, it's like a goblet squat. Right? You're more upright, the core's on, you're right in the right positions. People, they squat great, but you can't add load. And the lights went on. And I'm like, and so we went in and reframed like our messaging. And it was, people treated it like a brand new product. Like, oh my God, this is amazing. I can't believe you just came out with this. And I'm like, this has been on the market for like 2.5 years at this point. I'm like, and so, yeah, it's, in the early days, it was very much a small cult following. Now, it was an audience that knew me and trusted me. So in some of those times, we'd have a new product, put it on the website, and we wouldn't even have like the images up around the product, and we'd get sales because people were like, oh my God, well, if Kabuki's releasing it, know it's good, know I need it, don't know what it is, but I'm ordering it, right? But again, those volumes were so low compared to the broader market. But I think right now there's still just a massive, massive gap in opportunity within this. It's like, so much, but, you're looking at your audience and others like that are, aware and they're researching and they're looking at concepts. They know a lot of the educational content that I put out, they understand, right? But how much of the market is truly that? How many gyms don't have a transformer bar? How many, we have such a long ways to go, I still think. And it's crazy to see how far we've come from a 1-person, 3-person company to, a much larger manufacturing organization that's a pretty well-known brand. But at the same time, like you step outside of our circles and people are like, who's Kabuki?
No doubt.
Bar, why is that bar bent? Like so we feel like we're everywhere. But like I said, you step outside of your little circle and it's really rapidly right back to the same place again.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was going to bring that up too. Like like you said, if you take one step out, nobody has any idea why you have something like that. But I will say we've been doing our surveys for the last 3 or 4 years, and we ask questions. Like we have a specialty bar survey that we ask every 6 months or so. And it is ticking up the level of interest each time. So it's just, I was just curious to hear what like the market looks like these days, even though like it may just be like, it may have gone from like 0.5% of the market to like 2%. Yeah. Still 4 times more,
But I've been talking to some pretty big players as far as other equipment manufacturers and commercial gyms and things of that nature. And everybody has seen what's happened over the last several years of us pushing this. And people are saying that they see this as being the trend, that this is going to be where you're going to see this type of equipment pretty much standard in a lot of racks and products out there in the future. And so we're on the leading edge of that, but that is a change that's happening in the market.
Yeah.
Or at least big players in the market believe is going to happen.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, I see that as just even like the home gym, like purchase order. I see those like, instead of buying a rack of dumbbells, you might actually choose a specialty bar before going with the dumbbells. It's just like personal preference. But yeah, I definitely see that. Anyways, back to the storyline. So when did you think you were going to make it as a company? You may not think you are going to make it still.
That's always a question. It's interesting being in a business owner perspective, right? Yeah, you always have those questions, those self-doubt, and you're like, is this really is this really a thing? And I've got a couple different stories there, I guess. So yeah, let's go to pandemic time, right? Which didn't serve us well. That's actually when we got way behind to our customers and had to shut off sales. And it really ended up being quite a detriment to our brand as a whole, just because we started to explode right before that. And then supply chain issues, we actually were updating some products and re-releasing them at the time. So we couldn't get into some of our vendor shops that were doing stuff. So managing some of the transition was really challenging. So 2020 was a hard year for us, right? But like I said, we started to explode. And as soon as, things started shutting down, it was an eye-opening experience when these coaches for like all these elite players, like call up just begging, it's just like, hey, every one of the people on the Lakers, starting to like, they want your products in the home gym or their trainers or wherever. I'm like, well, they got to wait like everyone else. But it was like, all of a sudden it's like, okay, some of the best players in the world and still like, they order directly from us and, seeing that stuff come through, it's like, these people have access to any piece of equipment that they want. They have people around them that are going to guide them to not make stupid decisions. And very consistently, they're choosing Kabuki. And I'm like, that is an indicator that we are on the right path, that we are doing something special and having an impact. And so that was, seeing that stuff come in was really great. And I think that was the experience for me. Like, yes, we're going to make it. We got something big. Now it's been a challenge of macroeconomic factors since there, from like supply chain and current market conditions and all that stuff that goes on. But that's the world we live in. Everybody faces that stuff, right?
Cool. All right. So I'll merge these next two questions, but your role is Chief Visionary Officer right now at Kabuki. So number one, what does that mean? And then number two, with that, where do you see Kabuki in 5 years or so?
Right. So I use that title very specifically, although most people I don't think grasp it because they always reach out to me and they're like, especially on LinkedIn, oh, you're CEO, do this. Like, everybody always comes through me to drive action in the company, right? And it's just like, no, that's not my role. I don't manage the operating structure of the company. And people find that very odd. But that's what I did for like 20 years for other companies, right? And I did that. And I realized that when you're stuck in that, I wouldn't call mess, but you're managing that type of activity and there's all these inputs and things going on as you're managing the logistics of the company's operation, that you don't have the space or the ability to have the creative outlet that you need when it comes to thinking about where things are going, creating new products, like all that aspect. So I use the title Chief Visionary, but it allows my role to float. So sometimes I'm very focused on operations. If there's issues that are going on, I'm working my network, whatever it is, because I see the long-term impact that that's going to have. It may be more marketing focused, more education focused. So I kind of rotate through the business in a variety of different roles, working with the leaders in those areas. And, and that's driven by what I see as those opportunities. So, but specifically for the visionary, like I create the concepts a lot of times that are used in our products, or I'm the filter around ideas or final iterations of products as well. That people, products that may come to the table via other sources and so on. So I'm that filter. And as far as like the 5 years, I guess, that you're talking about, like you've been talking about Kabuki as being a specialty bar manufacturer, and that's not really how I view ourselves. I view ourselves as being a company that, reinvents the basic tools that are proven over time. It's not fancy nuance of this entirely new thing. It's fundamental movements, but re-envisioning what that is in the gym. And so we're slowly working through that. And so, we've got our line of
barbells that meet that needs. We've got
Yeah.
now our handheld weight or smart dumbbell that we have that is just tremendous in its ability to what it can offer once you start playing around with it. There's a lot of education, I think, that's still got to go around that one to get people to really grasp it before actually using it. And then we've got our first in the series of it's a cable type products, but our flywheel. So we've got 4 different iterations of a flywheel out there as well. And so it's working that way through the entire scope of what a gym is front to back and reinventing those things with those concepts of being able to rapidly accommodate for the variability of an individual, right? While providing the inputs and the joint positions and the things that we need to be able to adapt in the best manner possible to enhance our performance while reducing the potential for risk for injury. And so in 5 years, I hope to be very close towards being done with that.
Very cool. But yeah, that makes sense. I think especially barbells were just phase 1, I guess.
Yep.
That's kind of, yeah.
It was the easiest entry point, right? And so, if you came out with a completely new rack that nobody had seen and off the bat, like it'd be a lot like versus it's, tackling the pieces and then now starting to pull that together is like an entire cohesive package. Because right now, a lot of Kabuki products, people may look at it and think, oh, that's the special extra thing after I have all the fundamentals that I add on top, instead of realizing like, oh, if I get a couple of these things, these core cornerstone things, I actually don't need a whole lot of other things. And so that's the concept, just pulling all that together into a package where it's like, oh, here's these things. And now that covers the base of like so much ground, right? Like if I start with an open trap bar, right? How many other tools can I eliminate? Add a couple Q-bells. Okay. Now all of a sudden, holy crap, I've got nearly every barbell movement taken care of, near every kettlebell and dumbbell movement taken care of. Like, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, my total cost of ownership is way down. And now because of the ability to rapidly accommodate as well, like, so is my space utilization, my space needs, which are going to be the largest driver long-term in both the home gym as well as commercial market, because real estate costs are going to continue to go up as population around the world climbs, right? So how can we better and effectively utilize that? And so if you start putting all this together, you'll realize like, oh, here in a small space, like you only need a few things. My home gym, I've got a half rack with all the Kabuki bars, trap bar, I've got a Q-bell set and the Kratos flywheel. And I'm a pretty strong high level athlete. And I've got this, 400 square foot room that is way more than enough in size. And I could train at the most top tier levels. Like, and I don't like, it's all there. I can do anything that I could do in a commercial gym or anywhere else. Like it's all there in a small space. But I started with Kabuki, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people end up having a whole lot of this other stuff and then add it on, and they're missing the true opportunity. And that's where I need to do is package that together and showcase how that actually happens, and not expect the end consumer to go, oh, here's how I would put that together. Oh, here's a storage solution or whatever to make that stuff happen. And now it works. And now all these things make sense. So those are the next phases.
Cool. All right. What's a product that you helped create that you're most proud of?
I think that's going to be the Transformer bar, because it has the most unique proprietary product out there. There is nothing like it in the world. And it is, it's tremendous. So people that haven't used it, a lot of times they may look at it as a safety squat bar until you've used one and you can realize how phenomenal it is for working different patterns and what you can do. It's why, like I said, every single Major League Baseball team out there has one, right? And the list goes on and on. So yeah, that's, I'm proud of all my babies. It's like asking which kid's your favorite, right? But
I know. I figured that was the case. All right. What about a product creation failure story? Do you have any of those?
God, I probably have a million, honestly, because it's like, that's the thing is everything is constantly like a filter for that. So I'm always evaluating and looking at things. And there's so much that gets tested, and why I don't like showcase a lot of new fancy innovative ideas and things like on my social channels, because I really want to vet things. I really want to make sure, is this truly essential, or is it the hot thing that I have interested in right now? And that is just so typical in our field that people do that. And I wrote an article actually on this. It's called the shiny object syndrome, or what I call the 6-month rule. And it's like, don't be out there posting about your butter in your coffee or this or that until like it's been 6 months and and you're still just doing that as a consistent habit because you realize the results. Because there's so many times that people are like, oh, and then I'm going to share it and do, and it's like, and then it falls by the wayside because it's fluff, it's extra, right? And the things that I brought to market, usually I've used for years before I've done so. Like the Cuba, I used them for 2.5 years before I brought that to market. The Transformer bar, that's based off of some bars that I originally built back in 2005, I think, maybe 2007, and used, again, the Duffin bar. Those are, I built and used those for 5 years, 6 years before we brought them to market. And so there's this piece of filtering. And so there's so many things that maybe are stories or whatever, but there's so many of them, they just fall by the wayside that I don't have a specific one, I guess. There are a few products that we did bring to market, I think in 2018 or so, 2019, that wasn't driven by myself. They were things that I'd made and used, and we're like, oh, we need some, lower cost stuff that's in the $50 to $150 range on our page. Here, Chris, here's some things that you've made. Let's bring it to market. So there was like the band measuring device, it was a hookup for a scale. You can figure out your band tension, right? There was a brief puller, like some vice grips with some flat heads on them so that you could clip onto some briefs, the old powerlifting gear or suit, hanging on a bar and like get into it really easy. Those things didn't hold the test of time. They're very unique in niche, and yes, I've used them and have done so for years, but it's not really a larger market viable approach. So those would fall into the actual launched and probably failure type products.
Okay, there we go. What about cheaper specialty bars flooding the markets? What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, I mean that's part of doing business, right? When you create new concepts, and not all of those can be patented or have IP around them, you're going to have some knockoffs. A lot of times, people like to do direct comparisons and go, well, look, this bar's, X amount cheaper than this other one, and not really look into the details around it. It's like, do you realize, like, our trap bar, we've got the best warranty on the market. We have the highest load capacity. We have the longest sleeve length. We have, like, the list goes on, and you start looking at products. It's like, oh, those really cheap ones have 12-inch sleeves, so I can't even put 4 bumper plates on there. Oh, it's got a warranty, but the warranty is not for is for home use and 600 pounds. Like, it's not like, so what does that mean if it's not for everyday use? And it's only, you start adding that up, and it's like, oh no, here's this difference, here's that. And so I always like, it is a value proposition, and I don't know where an individual consumer's value is, but buying a bar that doesn't have machine sleeves, well, your collars are going to slide off, your plates aren't going to go on there as well. There's a function of fit and feel and so on. But it's, if I make the best quality product out there, that's not going to be something that is going to meet everybody's needs, right? It's something that I can feel good about and I can put my name behind. And I can't create a $200 bar that is going to be an economy, 400 load capacity, no warranty, throwaway product that you're going to find on Titan Fitness or whatever, right? I can't put my name behind it because that's going to hurt my credibility. It's going to hurt my, like, there's so many people that know if they buy that product, it's going to be X level, but that may not be accessible to everybody. So it's always a point of trying to find this accessible area and so on. So I guess at the end of the day, it is very, I guess it's a feather in the cap when you make products and they start getting knocked off all over the place. So you're like, oh, all right, I guess these ideas must have some merit, right?
Right.
Because when I usually bring them to market, that's the first thing I hear is, all the Kabuki or Duffin detractors that are like, oh, that's pointless. That's whatever. It's extra, whatever the argument is that they like to use. And then it's like, well, if that's the case, then why are there 7 different knockoffs of that now?
Yep.
So it's always a balance, and figuring out how to protect your IP. And then again, some people can use that as a hammer in trying to protect things that shouldn't be protected, which was an experience I had the last couple of years too. So
that was my next question. Can you answer, or how did that lawsuit with Eleiko go?
Yeah, I can answer that. So that was a really interesting scenario. So way back, I can't remember the year, maybe it was 2018, 2019. We both ended up releasing these concepts on the same day. I think ours was like 4 hours after theirs because they had leaked theirs, but we were actually further along in our production and we're closer to actually shipping a product. And so we're like, oh, better release ours today too. It's literally done, sitting right here. And so we released it. We hadn't filed a patent because we knew the combination of features, it wasn't patentable and shouldn't be able to pass a patent. I'm going to try to do this fairly fast. So anyway, long and short, they start threatening us for quite some time about, copying their design, which simply is not a fact. Like, that didn't happen. Now, they did file a patent. It was not very good and did not cover like our bar. Like, we did not infringe, which is crazy because there's actually several bars on the market that directly infringe with Eleiko's patent, by the way. I won't name names, but there's some major players in this industry and they directly infringe with that patent. We don't. But we were the one that kind of knocked them off their high horse for ego because they were hoping to sell a whole bunch. Ours was a better product at a cheaper cost and ready to go to market. And so it really crushed that. And so they kept pushing this. And I kept saying like that it's a bullying tactic. Like, they're trying to use money and lawyers to try to bully us into this. And so it came and I think the reality is that got shown because we fought it and kept standing up to it. And then finally, 24 hours before the first day in court, they basically begged to walk away from the case if we didn't countersue them. And so
Interesting.
There's a picture of me on the court steps in a sleeveless suit because and it wasn't from them walking away. Me and my wife planned on taking that photo the next morning on the way to court and saving it for when we won the lawsuit. And it's like, because that was the outcome. Like, it was completely, it was using money and lawyers to try to bully and push us around. And a lot of people would have conceded because the cost to fight it, even up to what we did, it just doesn't make sense. And it's just unfortunate because it ended up wasting a lot of money on both sides that could have gone into developing new products and innovation. Instead, it was done in a litigious manner to, try to push around a small entry in the market that was shaking things up, and that we were in a position that we probably should have conceded financially. It really, really hurt us. And we're still kind of in recovery mode from that. And, that's the unfortunate side of it. And if it was, but at the same time, I won't stand down if I'm in the right. And that's the case. We were in the right, and there was just no way, because they wanted us to do a public release. So that was the condition, that we do a public release stating that we had copied their design and infringed on their patent. And then we were going to pay them royalties ongoing forever. And I'm just like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, I'll go under fighting this before I concede that, because that's not the freaking truth.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's gone.
It's gone. Over with.
It's gone. Yeah.
Cool.
So
Well,
hopefully they realize these other companies. So that's the case. Like if they had chased it through, it would have invalidated their patent when we won. And then they wouldn't be able to go after the people that actually infringe. But at this point, I'm not sure that I have the confidence in their thought process that they actually understand that and understand who's infringing on their patent and not. But they do have a number of people that are. So
okay. Well, that's about time. So I just want to say thank you again for hopping on. I'll mention there's a lot more on Chris's backstory in his books. Other podcasts go a lot more into more of his strength feats, etc. But before we go, would you mind just sharing the best place for people to follow you?
Yeah. So if you just actually go to my personal website, Chris Duffin, it's like muffin but with a D, .com. There'll be links to my social media. There'll be links to my book. It's a bestseller in, I think, 7 different categories: self-help, human psychology, philosophy. And so there's actually a free audio download via that, as well as links to Kabuki strength, barefoot shoes. So chrisduffin.com is a great central point. If you like just going straight to, social media or whatever, just go there, type in Chris Duffin, like muffin, but with a D. I'll pop up. I got a little blue check marks next to me on Facebook and Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn there as well. So you can find me, and there's a link in my profile to all the same things as well. So won't overcomplicate it. No screen names or avatars to remember or anything like that.
All right. And we'll throw that link in the description. But anyways, thanks again.
Thank you.